Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome to Through a Scottish Prism. Nice to be with you again. Hope yours are well. Now, this is quite a special recording. If you're actually seeing this is a miracle in itself, because Hazel Techie's on holiday. Yes, they get holidays. John the Techie is unavailable, so I'm your Techie. So if this is managing to actually get out and you've got a show, we should be happy. So if we don't get some of the usual slickness, you know it's because of me. But I hope it doesn't ruin your enjoyment too much. So let's, without further ado, get in the crew, get my stress levels down a wee bit. We'll start. We've got our over there in Edinburgh, we've got Lloyd. Lloyd, how are you? And right on cue, the neighbour's dog starts barking.
I'm well, Roddy. If I could just take a minute, tomorrow, Monday, is Ian Lawson's funeral, and I'm a terrible one for talking about the historical memory. Well, when we did the programme dedicated to Ian, I got a very, very important fact wrong. The bet that was made at the Govan by-election was in actual fact done by Gil Patterson. Ian was his co-conspirator, but primarily the idea came from Gil, and it was Gil that did it. I also, after I'd said that, felt that I can't leave people thinking that the most important thing Ian did for the movement for independence was put a bet on in a bookies in Govan. I think it should be remembered, and it is the most important thing about Ian, is that Ian left the Conservative Party after challenging Margaret Thatcher over the destruction of the Scottish steel industry. A brave move to make. He led that campaign, did remarkably well, but unfortunately, as we all know, we no longer have a steel industry, despite the efforts of Ian Lawson. And I'd just like to correct the record. Ian should be remembered for his political campaigning on behalf of Scotland. That's the most important thing about him.
Yeah. Sadly missed. Sadly missed. Not irreplaceable. Moving on. And of course, we've got a favourite lawyer, Eva. Welcome, Eva. How are you?
I'm in good order this week, Roddy. I think this week we've seen the best and the worst of Scottish political life. And I just wish that those good people in Scotland that know what they're talking about were in power or in positions of greater influence than they are today, because if they were, and had Ian Lawson been in a position of power in Scotland, not only would we be independent, but the country would be in far better nick than it is just now.
Indeed it would. And we have, of course, got the Coatbridge Cavalier in Coatbridge, no less. Welcome, Philip.
Aye, how's everybody doing? It's always great to be back to the Brig. As I keep saying, it's not the town centre or the opportunities or the wealth of Coatbridge that throws me back here, but the people. And they're in great need, as the rest of Scotland is right now, of a better future. And my God, we've got to fight for that.
And nice to have you. It's always nice to have you. Whatever you may be, it's nice to have you, my man. And to make up the quartet, we have up there in Perth, Sally. Sally, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Roddy. And I'd just like to just endorse what Lloyd said about Ian Lawson. He was very, very kind to me and giving me a platform to write some essays, and very, very supportive. And so knowledgeable, an absolute mentor, and so grounded as well. So it's a huge loss for the movement, and obviously for his family and friends. So what a gent of a guy.
Yeah. As I say, he'll be missed. Anyway, let's go on, because I'm sure you would have had plenty to say about some of the stuff that's been happening this week. Let me start. I'm going to start, as I say, nervous. We'll start with a small video of Mr. Stammer. I hope I am.
From last year, the Prime Minister was apparently drawing up plans to remove the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. his Paymaster General went a step further. He said, these are the sorts of things that we need to look at. So will he now rule out taking pensioners' winter fuel payments off them to help fund his £46 billion black hole?
There's hypocrisy, there's double standards, and then there's the Labour Party. Quite incredible, is it not? Lloyd?
Absolutely extraordinary. But then again, in the short few weeks that Starmer's been in charge, or the new Labour Party's been in charge, the number of about faces that they've done is quite extraordinary. But this one really takes the biscuit. To remove the winter fuel allowance from pensioners at the same time as you know that the gas and electricity prices are going through the roof, it's beyond understanding. But then again, Starmer has lied his way to number 10, and he'll continue to lie as he has done over the past number of years. As a man with no morals of that, there's no question.
Absolutely. But let's just to show what a dishonest, lying man this is, and that, they're trying to take over Holyrood as well. Remember, folks. Now listen to him on this one.
The energy price cap rise has been announced, and that's going to cause real pain for so many households. So many people have said to me, look here, I may not be the hardest up. I'm going to really struggle to pay these energy bills. Small businesses that have said, look, the last 2 years have been really tough with COVID, and now we're expected to pay these massive increases. At the same time, oil and gas companies are making enormous profits. And I think everyone can see that's just not right. And that's why the Labour Party has a fully costed plan to freeze energy bills this winter. And we'll pay for that with a windfall tax on those unexpected profits. I understand, I completely understand why so many people are frustrated at the government that's not doing anything about their energy bills, that's dithering and delaying, just like it did at the beginning of the year. In the end, politics is about choices. And this government is choosing to protect the profits of oil and gas companies, unexpected profits of oil and gas companies, rather than sticking up for and helping hardworking families and struggling businesses. I hope that, just as we did earlier this year, we can force them into a U-turn, because under my leadership, Labour is on the side of working people. And under my leadership, we can have a fresh start for Britain.
Yeah. Beaver. Marvellous. Just a couple of things. Politics is about choices. That's right, Kieran. You chose to go back and everything you said. We're on the side of the working man, really. So you're putting up the energy prices. He also said we have a fully costed plan to freeze bills. And one of the first things they do, remove the winter allowance and allow Ofgem to stick up by 9%.
The polite summary of that is to say that Keir Starmer, like most of the others, speaks with forked tongue. But I'm not in a very polite frame of mind today. The fact of the matter is, he's a lying, opportunistic Torag who says one thing to get into power and something entirely different once he's there. And let us not forget the promises about GB Energy, which are turning out to be absolutely worthless. And let us also remember that the coldest part of the United Kingdom is, of course, Scotland, and that those winter fuel allowance losses will hit the Scottish pensioners and the Scottish vulnerable people the hardest. And let us also remember that the average output of the North Sea, the Scottish North Sea, over the course of the last few years and the next few years will be between £8 and £10 billion per annum. And let us not forget that Scotland is the cash cow plundered on a daily basis by the Westminster governments, and this Labour government is actually proving itself not to be the equivalent of the Tories who preceded them, but to actually be going far, far further in the context of their cuts and the impact that those cuts will have. We said before the vote on the 4th of July that Labour were not to be trusted. but we had some politicians in Scotland strongly suggesting that they would be able to do deals with Labour and that it was better to be voting Labour than it was to be voting for other parties or independent candidates who were available. Well, it's all coming home to roost now, and I hope that every person in Scotland who voted Labour or who stayed at home because they didn't know who to vote for is now regretting that position and will be thinking extremely carefully about who they're going to cast their votes for in 2026. Because you know what? Labour are behaving as if they're cocky at the moment, but the hard fact of the matter is they're screwed and they know it. The proof of the pudding is the email that I and so many other people got this morning, and it's a plea to join in with Labour and put money into the Labour lottery, because there are two things we need to know, and this is directly from the horse's mouth. Labour intend to fight 21 county council elections and 6 unitary authority elections in 8 months' time, and they say they don't have any money to do it. They're working hard to deliver Labour victories in mayoral elections. Those are all in England. So people of Scotland, remember why Labour want your money, what they want it for, and where it's going. Down to England and down to Westminster to line the Westminster coffers so that Labour can maintain power there and look after themselves. Because one person who's no worrying about winter fuel allowances and the rising cost of gas and electricity is Keir Starmer, because the likes of us are paying his bills for him.
Yeah, absolutely we are. Every MP worth their salt would turn around and refuse to accept their energy allowance. But none of them are worth their weight in salt. They're not worth a pinch of salt, any of them. Phil, Anna Sarwar, excuse me, said to us, watch my lips, there'll be no energy, there'll be no austerity with the Labour government. His words have come back to bite him in the bum.
As usual, we knew that. We said that last week. And Keir Starmer, we said, as you pointed out, politics is about choice. You have no choice, people. With this situation that we've talked about, listen to the words of George Carlin in that famous, wonderful speech on YouTube. Please check it out. It's called The American Dream, but it applies equally here because we have now deteriorated into a situation where we're in exactly the same position that the American cousins face, and that is, you have no choice. You have the Red Tories or you have Labour. But you have Labour, which are the Red Tories, and you've got the actual proper Tories, who are taking a back seat just now as they hand over the baton to Margaret Thatcher's greatest achievement, as she said in her autobiography, her memoirs, which is the creation of New Labour. This is Tony Blair all over again. This is a Conservative government who are just handing over to the shadow Conservative government, who are Labour, but are just a shadow of the blue. They're just a lighter shade of blue, not much. An absolute disgrace. And people's, Eva's critique, I would adjust it slightly. She said, lying opportunistic Torag that Sir Keir Starmer is. I'd change that to lying opportunistic Tory. You people, you are paying energy bills that are 3 or 4 times higher than they need to be in Scotland. And it's gone up and up in the coldest part of the UK, as Eva pointed out. So this affects us more than anywhere else in the UK. See anybody giving a damn? And what's stuck with me, we've committed to freeze these bills. It's not a cap, it's just a cap on the price they can charge. You still use that energy. You still get wiped out. You can't. This is why it's heat or eat. It's the cost that they can. That's the only restriction that was there. The actual charge per kilowatt hour or part thereof that was constrained. They'll still screw you into the ground because we need that heat more than anyone else. And the energy industry for the UK is UK wide. And we've looked at these big conductors and the big superhighway for energy heading south. But the bottom line is, the reason they won't let us go is because the actual oil and gas and the hydro and all the renewable is predominantly in Scotland. It's all Scottish. 96.5% of the oil, approaches 70% of the gas, most of the hydroelectric. We've got 2 shovel-ready pumped storage facilities ready in Scotland. We are already self-sufficient. We can run. You look at what Portugal's done recently. It's the cheapest energy in Europe, and it's got a fraction of the energy we've got. Scotland outstrips Portugal in every department when it comes to provision of energy and resources, and yet we pay the most in Europe, and they're paying the least. You're getting conned, folk. It continues, and it's a disgrace, and he's a lying dog.
Yep. Last week's... Oh, I lost everyone for a second there. I hope you're all back. Sally, last week we were talking about the superhighway. And then this week we've now got a price rise. They waited a week, only a week. There's absolutely gaslighting us, aren't they?
There we go. Can you hear me? Is that working?
I'm just talking to myself here.
No.
All right, we got a break there. You're back.
Yeah.
Did you hear my question?
I did, and yeah, they are gaslighting us. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Definitely gaslighting us, but a demoralised public is a placid public.
Just keep talking.
And while while Scotland is the cash cow and the energy cow, then the England has a national emergency if Scotland goes independent. I looked at figures between 2014 and 2019 of electricity production and usage throughout the UK. England has an 11% electricity deficit. Scotland produces 16% at that time of the electricity throughout the UK, and it used 7 to 8% of that for itself. So 9% of the 11% deficit of England was going down to subsidise England. And that did not take into account gas production. Half of the UK gas production goes to the turbines that change gas into electricity, which are located in England. So overall, if you took that into account, with 60% of the UK's gas being in Scottish territorial waters, you were looking at 20% of England's homes being heated by electricity that came one way or another from Scotland. That is a state of national emergency if Scotland goes under new ownership for England. Now, it's not a state of emergency for Wales because they also siphon off surplus energy from Wales, and they do the same for Northern Ireland. So when you see it in that cold light of day, it makes things clear as to just how vital destroying Scotland is for them. So there is no choice for us. It's independence or bust. It's independence or it's over. One of the things that came out in the general election down in England was campaigners started using the term the British Uni Party for both Labour and the Conservatives. Now we cottoned on in 2014 that we had the red Tories or the blue Tories, but I quite like this British Uni Party, and my God, Starmer has not dressed it up any. But then if you look at Labour's always pushed through brutal policies that the Tories couldn't get away with, but they do it with a sad face and a wringing of the hands, and they get away with it because their supporters really can't believe that their own Tory party, their own party would do that to them, and that there must be some sweetener at the back of it, or it's temporary or whatever. So, but this levy, this 9%, this tax will be used to upgrade and pay for the power lines that are at the back of GB Energy to steal Scotland's electricity and have the profits go to Westminster. And we shouldn't be in any doubt about that. Again, it's designed to ensure that we are kept under the cosh. That's the Scottish people. I I live in Perth. I live in Scone, just outside Perth, and I used to work in Blairgowrie, and I worked shifts, and it's only 18 miles away, and every day, it didn't matter if it was early shift, back shift, or night shift, I used to look at the thermometer in my car as I drove there. It always dropped 2 degrees centigrade because Blairgowrie is just at the foot of the mountains, and it's a little bit of a, well, it's the start of the Highlands, genuinely, really. So 2 degrees drop every single day, winter, summer, autumn, spring, morning, noon, or night, 2 degrees drop. That's just one example of the temperature discrepancy between Scotland and even different parts of Scotland and England. So we're screwed, and it's very, very deliberate. And it's the Workers' Party that are doing it to us, and doing it on behalf of the British English state. And this is English nationalism writ large, and it's been fascinating to watch how genuine socialists, English socialists, tie themselves in knots because they are just as colonialist as the Tories, but they're much less comfortable with that, and they will tie themselves in all sorts of knots to sort of wriggle out of that. They have their consciences wriggle out of it, but they are English nationalists fighting for England's interests, and they don't care which other part of the Britain that they screw over in order to make sure England survives.
Yeah. They're not the worst. The worst ones are Scots-born English nationalists, Sally. They're the worst. And there's plenty of them. But could I just moving on, because the clock's already getting ahead of us here. Lloyd, the justification for this rise is just ridiculous. When this year we know that, for example, British Gas, or whatever they're called, Consignia, or whatever they're called, made 700 million or billion, I don't know. But listen to this. This is the Ofgem, who are meant to protect the consumer, not the companies.
To us in the clearest possible terms why that 10% figure can't be 6%. Why can it not be 8%? Why can you not just fix that price lower?
Well, the main reason is that the price cap is designed in a way that says, look, energy companies can recover fair costs and a small profit, but no more than that. And when those costs change, those costs unfortunately do feed through to the bill. Now, as a regulator, as you can imagine, we do everything we can to bear down on those costs.
A small profit, Lloyd, almost £1 billion. A small profit, he said. That's the justification. What's the definition of small and large profit?
I think these definitions are made up by the people who are benefiting from them, and that's seldom the consumer, and it's certainly not us. It's the fact that we, possibly per head of capita, the biggest energy producer in the Northern Hemisphere, we should be giving our people electricity for nothing. We should get our gas for nothing. We should not be even contemplating the idea of building new nuclear power stations. The opportunities we have for the expansion of our renewable energy, if we were to look to some of the previous ideas, particularly pump storage and hydroelectric, are absolutely enormous. But this cuts directly to the central question. And the central question is, and always will be until we achieve it, the independence of our country. We have to make clear to people, particularly during and through this argument, we are subsidising the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The people of Scotland are living, 1/4 of them, in poverty so that we can provide for the rest of this benighted nation. The facts of the matter are we require politicians, spokespeople, commentators, to continually remind our people of how rich our country is, but how poor we are being kept. Because that's the fact. We are being kept in poverty and penury for the benefit of the United Kingdom government. They have no care for our people, they have no care for our future, and they have no care for our children. Of that, there is no question whatsoever. Everybody thought there would be change, that wonderful word that gets rolled out every 4 or 5 years for an election. That was what people were told. They would have change. Yeah, the change is you've got a harder line Tory Labour Party than you did when you had that idiot Cameron or Johnson or Truss or any of them in charge. Independence has always been vital, but now it has to be, on the run-up to 2026, the absolute priority for anyone who has the best interests of the people of this country at heart.
Here. I just, if I can say before I come to you, this is, as I said at the start, the show is the first week where I don't have any techies. And for the first time, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm having hellish internet problems here, and I'm losing you guys. I don't know if everyone else is, or it's just me. I'm hoping it's just me. This is the last time we allow people to have holidays. It's not allowed to happen again. Because this is God punishing me. As if it's no bad enough being a Rangers fan. I'm getting punished enough, God. Please, get off. Eva, 9% gives them a small profit, 700 million, whatever. It's more than I'll ever earned. It's scandalous.
We know it's scandalous, and the issue here is not actually how much profit these people are making, or the profiteering of these people, or the politicians that actively enable them to profiteer. The issue for the people of Scotland is, what are they going to do about it, and what are they going to demand that their Scottish politicians do about this? Now, what you've seen in the last few weeks, especially on social media, is that newly elected Labour MPs continue to promise everybody in Scotland and their constituencies particularly great change. They have not actually delivered anything. They're not going to deliver anything. They cannot even tell you what's happening at Grangemouth, although several of them, including my own MP, used that as leverage to persuade people to vote for them. But they've become unusually and inordinately silent in that regard. We all know why. It's because they are not going to do a damn thing to keep that refinery open. Because politically, for the Union, there is no point in Scotland having its own refinery. A scorched earth policy is far better, where the refineries are all south of the border. So they're silent in respect to Grangemouth. They are silent in respect to what they're going to do about the NHS, other than for us to see that in the background there is creeping privatisation of elements of the NHS. They are completely incapable of justifying the removal of the issue, the problems that we've covered already in respect to the winter fuel allowance, and the harsh reality for everybody in Scotland who wants Scotland to better itself, to look after our own people, is that we cannot continue to elect politicians with a British attitude and with loyalty to Britain and to Westminster. We need politicians and leaders whose hearts and souls and minds are absolutely and totally attuned and principled to what is best for the people who live within Scotland. Every day last week you saw bulletins about the number of people that had come across in boats across the English Channel and had arrived here, and you had people ranting and raving on social media and on the news about stopping the boats, and nobody was getting up to say, hold the bus. Scotland's population is shrinking and ageing, and we need immigration, and we need to look after people and families in Scotland so that we can address lots of issues that, if you study demographics at all, you'll understand are going to hit us very, very hard in the future. We need young people here to be employed in jobs that are worth having, that are better paid, where they have the confidence of living within their own communities. We need not to have folk leaving the islands, the Western Isles and Skye, because they can't afford to buy a house, because the people that are coming in and buying them are coming from the south of England and turning them into Airbnbs or properties that they live in for a couple of months in the year. We cannot afford for that position to continue, but our Scottish Government is doing damn all to rectify it. You know, what we hear all the time, and it was heard this week in the context of the awful figures on drugs. You can't do that because Westminster holds the powers. We need a government in Scotland run by people who are prepared to say, we're doing this, whatever it is, whether it's a national energy company or a national housing corporation or a real national fight against the drugs war. We are doing all these things because they're for the betterment of the people of this country. And by the way, we're having a constitutional convention and we're using the money from the Holyrood budget to pay for it. And we're inviting the folk in this country that know what Scotland needs, because for far too long, Scots have said, oh no, you can't do that, because we should be running with the ball with both hands now and saying the goal is independence by every peaceable democratic method that we can achieve. And it begins with feeding our people, heating our people, taking control of energy companies, taking control of assets in Scotland that are needed for the best for the best outcomes for our folk. You know, at the moment we've got schools in Scotland where teachers are getting money from the council, or putting in their own money to buy food for children, to get clothes for children, to repair old school uniforms for children, to run school uniform banks, to have washing machines to wash children's clothes when they come into school in the morning. We've got a multitude of local authorities where there are serious issues of overwork for social workers. We've got drugs agencies who cannot cope with the people that are coming to them for help, who are crying out for help and not getting it. And the reason that they're not getting it is because our public services are in a mess. And one of the reasons why they're in a mess is because our resources, our money's going south and we're getting back a pittance. It's as if you handed your next door neighbour your pay packet, he gave you back some pocket money, and he laughed at you when your windows were broken and you couldn't afford to fix them, when you couldn't afford to fix your roof, when your roof was leaking, when you couldn't turn on the tap and get clean water because everything was falling apart, because he's got your money and you can't look after yourself. That's what's happening in Scotland, and it will only get worse under a Labour government. And once Labour take control of Holyrood, the game's a bogey.
Yeah, true. The problem is, at the moment, there's no alternative, and that's what we've got to work on. We've got to work on that, folks. I mean, they're talking at the moment, they're saying that, you know, believe it or not, there's a Tory leadership going on. And I thought, why bother? Why not just make Starmer leader of both parties and call it the business and wealthy party? Save money in elections, because it makes no difference. Because here we are, Phil. We would get like this guy turn around saying a small profit. Now, you've been in the industry, you understand it. 700 million profit, up by God knows what percent. Their salaries up. This guy gets 16 grand a month. Easy for him to talk about, well, you know, it's going to be 9% rise. But when you're on a pension or a fixed income, or you're a single parent, you know, or you're below the poverty line, 9% on your energy bill is a fortune.
Yeah, it's horrific. And a quick one on Eva's comments there. The biggest influx of immigrants to Scotland are our friends and cousins, the English. But in my Scotland, you ain't getting a vote in a constitutional election until you've been here for at least 10 years. As most vote for the Union, as we found out in 2014. So we don't use a local by-election mandate that was foisted upon us by the British for that referendum. We take it ourselves, and we use the tried and tested rules that are used around the world for constitutional votes, and that is, it goes to the people of that country, not students that have wandered in for a wee while. So now that needs corrected. The current profit levels for energy companies is obscene. It's obscene in the world that we currently live in this country, the way things are going for the rest of us. But the bulk of these spoils go to the UK government. The bulk of your payment goes to the UK government. Between these two entities, the deals are cut to rip off the punter. And where do some of those profits for energy companies go? Via the lobbyists back into backing the politicians whose policies enable this theft from the people. It's revolution time. Two companies I work for, and I've 5.5 years with BP, 3.5 with Shell, and I've worked a fair bit over, and amongst other companies, Qatar Petroleum, a whole bunch of other ones, including the Norwegians. More on that one in a wee bit. But Shell profit figures hit $39.9 billion. That's just over 32 billion in 22, double the previous year's total, and the highest in the 115 years of Shell's reporting history and profits. BP reported profits of 6.9 billion. Again, this was a report in 2022 because the figures are obviously backdated a wee bit, for the 3 months to June in 2022. And that was days after forecasters predicted annual household energy bills will climb to £3,420 per annum this winter, which they did. And then these figures, and then that figure for BP, which is the second highest in the firm's history, and triple the amount it reported for the same period in 2021, comes at a time when much of the nation is fearful that they'll be unable to pay their gas and electricity bills this winter when prices increase. Let that sink in, folks. Also, this windfall tax is a con. It's the wrong thing to do. It's a crazy way to do business. You need stability if you want investment. You do need investment for these companies. We shouldn't be using the goalposts. But what we should be doing, what we will do as an independent Scotland is follow the more egalitarian, socialist, Scandinavian model. And we will be much closer to our Scandic cousins than anyone else going forward because of our shared values. This critically includes the philosophy that Equinor or Statoil. I worked for Statoil in the past, based out of Aberdeen, over in Stavanger quite a lot. Every barrel counts. It's a great philosophy and a model which we will follow when I, or someone like me, not some shyster patsy as we've had to date and currently have, people who know nothing about the industry and just do what they're told, like Neil Gray in energy. Neil Gray on health, he knows nothing about it. He'll just do what he's told and say what he's told. We need somebody who knows what they're talking about. We need the gumption to stand up as Energy Minister for an independent Scotland and tell them how it's going to work. It's our oil, it's our gas, it's our energy. It's just licences. It's just licences that are farmed out and bid every year. We need to take control of our country, our future, and fix this.
Indeed we do. And on cue, the dogs started barking. Here in Spain, who owns SSEB, incidentally, Scottish Power, as well, I believe. Anyway, they're talking about prices have risen here, but nowhere near the levels in Scotland and England. But they've said the reason for that is their overseas investments are allowing them to subsidise the electricity in this country. Isn't it great? Isn't it great? Guess what? That said, I'm putting on solar panels. Solar, it's called a thing called Sun Scotland. It's a big golden ball in it. And I'm going to use that. But in Scotland, because of planning regulations, you can't put up a wind turbine. It's so difficult because if you're so many metres, you've got away from your next door neighbour. Every house in Scotland should have a wind turbine because it's always blowing a hoolie out there. Every house in Scotland could be powered by wind with their own turbine, or certainly have subsidies. Sally, the obscenity of the price increases, allied to the fact that there was boasting last week, as I say, about taking all this electricity for nothing. It's a disgrace.
Certainly is, and that 9% profit hike, and the reason that they give for that is it's bull, and it's a shame we couldn't capture the methane from that with the, it's just it's just ridiculous. But Eva hit the nail on the head and saying, what are we going to do about it in Scotland? What are our MSPs and our councillors and our independent representatives going to do about it? And at the moment they're remarkably quiet. So we will have to make this, pin this to Scottish Labour, because they would love to pretend that they're a separate entity and it's nothing to do with them, Gov. But no, they get their money from the London the branch office of the London main office of the Labour Party, and the buck stops with them just as much. Eva also said a wonderful phrase, and I think we need to start using this. She said this was a scorched earth policy, or maybe she said it was a scotched egg earth policy. Both we need to use because it encapsulates what's happening. This scorched earth policy, a scorched earth policy, an energy policy that's fleecing Scotland and destroying Scotland. We also need to steal. There's a fine art to doing stuff when you talk about, to touch very briefly on the drugs issue and just grasping the nettle and the thistle and getting on with it. And to hell with what Westminster says. They can try and undo it once we've established it. It's really, really good. And within that goes the fine art of giving it a boring title so that they don't look away, because they do that to us all the time. The devil's in the detail, but if the title is unexciting and the first 3 paragraphs are convoluted and really boring, then it takes a real hero to go through that, and that's something we need to adopt. And in terms of moving the dial forward, leaving aside all political parties, what we should be doing is what we should have been doing in 15. The SNP should have been doing in 2015, but if we ignore them for the moment because they ain't going to do it, we need to be educating every single member of Scotland, including the newcomers, of the true state of Scotland's wealth and land and sea mass compared to England's, particularly sea mass. That's pictorially very easy to do, and we need to do that as a matter of course, as a solid policy everybody can get behind, regardless of party, regardless of differences. Get behind that, educate them, because all these new English retirees that have come up here on their fixed pension are now getting shafted just like we are on the highest heating prices in Europe. Let's make it so that they need to shy away and be ashamed when they start to realise just how much their country is screwing us, and it's now screwing them. But when the next year's laughable figures get produced, I want everybody to laugh at them and deride them because they're educated about the true facts of Scotland's wealth. And that is something that leaves all parties to one side, and it's something that the Yes movement could get behind and do in their own way, and in their own unique methods and to their own audience. Something positive to do rather than moan about.
Absolutely. Lloyd, I'm sick of writing or saying on here, told you so, told you so. I want to stop being a told you so. And we warned everyone long before this election what would happen, that the Labour Party would get in, and everything they did, they would blame the Tories in England and the SNP in Scotland, and the austerity would stay in place. Nothing would change. They were talking about change, and when you asked them to specify the change, they ignored you, they didn't reply, they moved on. It was a soundbite. But the latest one, we warned them, they weren't listening, and here it comes. It was famously, our Annis said, "Watch my lips, there'll be no austerity." There'll be no austerity, he said. And there we go. Rachel Rees is planning to raise taxes and cut spending. Now, that's a nice headline, but all that means, Lloyd, austerity is here to stay. The austerity is going to get, we're getting it in steroids. They lied. They will continue to lie. The austerity will continue, and poverty will increase.
Yes, it will. But unfortunately, with this particular Labour government, a bit like the last Labour government, they will say this is the position, and then 5 minutes later they change their minds because that's the new position. But I think it's patently obvious that this Labour government was prepared, for whatever reason, to say absolutely anything to achieve their aim, which was to become the government. They've got an enormous, absolutely enormous majority, and that, I think, is the primary danger. But for anyone to suggest that the Labour Party, particularly the Labour Party, are better custodians of the public finances than anyone else is frankly rubbish. The worst thing, I think, for us here in Scotland is the terrible vision of, in 2026, we have the joint horror of a Labour Party in power in Holyrood and a Labour Party in power at Westminster. The worst possible outcome for us. And what's really, really important is between now and the election in 2026, we find a way to defeat that possibility. But looking at the landscape, the political landscape of Scotland at the moment, it's hard to see where either the leadership or the imagination for doing that is going to come from. You know, we're in a situation where our Scottish government appears to be like a rabbit in the headlights, particularly this week over the issues of the drug deaths, but also the overall reaction to the announcement of the electricity price hike. They appear to have no answers, when in reality, as the most powerful energy producing country in Europe, the answers are all here if you choose. It's like we said earlier, politics is about choices. When is someone in the Scottish National Party or someone in the Scottish Government going to choose to say no? We no longer agree. We no longer go along with this. But unfortunately, when I look at the landscape of the front bench of the Scottish Government, I'm not seeing lots of imagination. Maybe the biggest problem we have here in Scotland with the so-called leaders of our independence movement, or the leaders of our political movement, is the fact that they're not prepared to do what other political leaders in a similar position are. The Catalans don't fear going to prison. The Basques don't fear going to prison. You know, real leaders of liberation movements, of independence movements, are not in the least concerned about whether or not they break the law of the country they're attempting to leave. And in some ways, one of the things, you know, again, around the drugs issue, the constant cry from the Scottish Government is it's a reserved matter, it's a reserved matter, it's a reserved matter. If they had any gumption and if they had real care for the thousands who are dying as a result of our drugs problem, they wouldn't care whether it was against British law. They would challenge and they would take on and find the solution to the issue. But then that would require them to think in terms of not respecting the British way. And the sooner we get leaders who, like the Irish, don't respect the British way, the closer we'll be to being able to solve the serious social and economic problems that we have in this country.
Absolutely. Nelson Mandela, 26 years in jail. He led South Africa to independence. He wasn't scared to go to jail. One of the things they use, Eva, is that, we didn't know how bad it was, but we know, everyone knows, prior to an election, the opposition are given access to the civil servants and to facts they get to know. So for them to try and turn around and say, but we didn't know, that's why we lied to you before we would come into power. It's a bit naughty, is it not?
They knew perfectly well what the landscape was, both politically, economically, financially. None of that was secret. None of it was hidden. And if they didn't know, they should have known, because they've spent long enough trying to get power, and they've spent enough money, and they've enough people in positions of power and knowledge to have been able to forecast exactly where they now claim we find ourselves to be. The difficulty, though, for the Labour Party is that they're going to have to continue with this charade, and they clearly have no idea what the future holds other than more austerity, because they don't have the imagination or the philosophical or negotiating skills to get themselves out of the howk that they're in now. You know, they are in hawk to the US. They're doing the bidding of the US. Their priorities are such that they're committing billions, as we've spoken about before, to Ukraine. They're continuing to commit billions to weapons of mass destruction on the Clyde. So let's look at this from a Scottish context. We know from what others have said, and we say every week, what Scotland's potential is. We know the value of Scottish resources. We know the value of what Scotland has produced, is producing, and will continue to produce across all spheres, all of which create phenomenal incomes, which at the moment, as we've said, are being bled out, and we're being repaid a fraction of what we contribute to the British Exchequer. But let's look at what we could do had we control of our resources. And that's where those who favour independence have, as Sally said, a binding duty, an obligation to spell out in words of one syllable what's coming in, where it's going out, and where it ought to be going out to. Because we should be funding the NHS completely and fully. I know people like me who lost a leg, who were not told by staff in the NHS that instead of getting a clunky, not particularly fashionable leg as a replacement, as a prosthetic, they could have had a bionic foot. I knew I could get a bionic foot because they told me about it, but they also said I wasn't to go about telling other folk, or everybody would want one. Well, in an independent Scotland, everybody who needs a bionic foot should bloody well get one. In the context of rehabilitation spaces or places or beds, the Scottish Government definition of rehabilitation is not the definition that Anne-Marie Ward and others, including myself, would have. Rehabilitation should mean 6 to 12 weeks living on site in a place where 24/7 you have the assistance and the support that you need to recover and rebuild your life. And the aim of a proper rehabilitation process should be that people recover and they become abstinent and their lives are their own to control again, which they are not if they continue on plans such as the methadone programme, which has been a favourite of the Scottish Government and the Scottish NHS for far too long. The figures on the people who have died using methadone are the highest ever, and it's one of the biggest contributors, and it only goes to show that parking people on methadone is wrong. Beyond this, had we out the control of our own resources, we could build the houses that people need. We could talk about not just tackling poverty, but eradicating poverty. There are 15 times, you're 15 times more likely to die a drug's death in a poor area than in a rich area. That tells you all you need to know. Poverty is the cause of so many of our ills, whether it's being care experienced or becoming involved in crime or becoming homeless. We know this. It's not news and it's not rocket science, but it is not difficult to attack and to solve and to create a better future if you've got independence, autonomy, and you have your priorities right. And the priorities that I've set out are the priorities of the majority of the people of Scotland. The pity is that we don't have politicians in positions of power that are prepared to stand up and risk going to jail for breaking the law for the good of the people of the country. But you know what? The Brits wouldn't jail a Scottish politician that broke the law to deliver any of these populist projects because they wouldn't want to turn them into martyrs. So I'm looking forward to folk like me and Sally, and I would like to thank Lloyd and Phil being elected in 2026 to Holyrood. I'll stick my hands out now for the cuffs because there's nobody in Westminster would have the balls to jail any of us that stood up for the people of Scotland.
Hear, hear. Fight and talk. And we do have some ideas, folks, here on Prism on how we can get things moving, and that will come very soon. We're working on something. Phil, the clock's kicking on as always, and I want you to cover the Labour austerity, I do. But as part of your response to me, this is the sneaky part. Our little Governor-General is getting powers. Labour plan to bypass Holyrood and give direct spending powers to the Governor-General, e.g. Ian Murray. Absolute starting, beginning, the thin end of the wedge to end devolution completely. We know what they'll do. They'll feed Labour councils, Labour areas they want to take off the SNP. That's what's going to happen. But this is the thin end of the wedge, is it not?
Very much so. Devolution turned out to be a failure for the union. It backfired on them. So now they will deconstruct it. And that's exactly what they're doing. As soon as Labour came into power, they put into effect, and this was a planned handover, they put into effect the Tory plan, the Conservative plan to deconstruct devolution. The 150 million initiative to tackle poverty in Scotland. It's not that. What you say is bang on the money, Roddy. They'll use it wherever it gets best influence and most bang for the buck to persuade the people in that area that Labour are the future and that only Labour will help them, not sadly the SNP. And the problem is they've got a point, and that's all down to Nicola. It's her failures that have got us into this mess and allowed us. Her failures. Nicola, I blame you. John Swinney, Angus Robertson, everybody that's part of that cabal, and it continues to work with these shysters. You deserve to be thrown out of politics permanently. I mean, expanding. I mean, it's the thing that makes me so angry is that This tackling of poverty that they trumpet, they fanfare by Labour, again, it will be ineffective. Again, it misses the point that Eva articulated so well. It's killing our people. It's destroying our society. It's tearing people down. It's hurting us, a very proud people, and too many people are too proud to speak about it. And again, a portion will be stolen by the unionists, the unionist shysters of this 150 million. But sadly, this ineffective approach will be just as ineffective as the current Scottish Government's approach, a useless bunch of spineless, freeloading traitors in the Scottish Government, and the same as the people. It's become undistinguishable. It's indistinguishable between the Conservative representatives, the Labour, and now the Scottish Government. That's the tragedy here for me. An SNP that used to fight up and stand up for the people is gone. It's melted away. My major concern here, and the big point we must not forget, let them do it. Don't make the same mistake as Nicola did during Brexit and fight Brexit instead of fighting for independence. It's the same here. Focus on fighting for the independence of our people and our country. We're for my country's independence.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, let the Brits do what they do. Because apart from anything else, Sally, this is so undemocratic. 79% of the people who voted for devolution, they voted for devolution. They didn't vote for the British government to decide our spending priorities. Now, this extra 150 million, it's not extra. It's coming out the Scottish budget, which will be going to Scottish cabinet secretaries to decide the spending. But we've now got an English MP, albeit he's in a Scottish constituency, deciding that it's just undemocratic, is it not?
Very much so. But what it's done is give the Labour Party up here a treasure chest. They can now recruit gravy trochers and give them sweeties. But we need to also remember that the Labour Party needs poverty. It likes poverty. It engenders a kind of promoted learned helplessness, and that's its song. That's the song it likes to sing to its electorate. And if you remove poverty, if you actually cure poverty, you deprive them of that song, and they don't have another song and they don't like it. It's one of the fundamental reasons why they didn't take to the EU, because the EU actually went ahead and did things that actually improved workers' lives, like health and safety measures, like the Working Time Directive. And it made a difference. And suddenly the Labour Party's nose was well out of joint because it diminished the strength of their song. So just going back to the Westminster austerity, part of this is to facilitate the movement that's international, but we're feeling it now, of public asset sell-off. And so if you can bankrupt local councils, you can steal their parks, steal their libraries, steal all the public assets. So this is a way of justifying that, making it like, well, you know, there's nothing else we can do. We don't have the money to run this park. We don't have the money to run this sports centre. We don't have the money. We have to sell it off. We can't run it anymore. And of course, they get sold off cheap. They don't get sold off at their market value. And ultimately, that's going to also justify the free ports, the free cities, and the special economic zones that will usher them in under this will bring in jobs, but it won't. It's bargain basement destruction and the destruction of our democracy at every level. So these are things, and it's all coordinated, it's all planned, and we continually are on the back heel, react as we piece it all together. By the time we've pieced all the parts of the jigsaw together, we're continually on the back heel, working it all out. So, this is what they're up to. And their ability to get that through to the electorate is we have a very fine slither of opportunity to do that, and certainly not in the time period of an election itself. But you know, we have I think, to put down the mantle of politics as normal and speak to our neighbours and help our neighbours and people in our community. And if the purpose of all forms of government at local, middle level, local Holyrood and Westminster level is to fix the potholes, to ensure that people are educated, healthcare, well, these are actually things that are in our remit to do. It's just that we're so used to having to phone the council to get it done, or write to an MP or MSP to get it done. If we now know that doing that is useless, then we just need to get on with doing that ourselves, and educating ourselves and stuff. And that's probably one reason internationally why you're seeing this backlash against social media and the misinformation. While there is misinformation out there, there is also approved narratives and hard evidence, and that hard evidence is precious. It's one of the reasons why libraries are also precious and why they're under attack. So these are some of the tools we will have to have just to survive. And we have to survive if independence is ever to succeed. I can't hear you, Roddy. Sorry.
I'm on mute. I owe myself a quid. Terrible. Just a wee plug here from my blog, www.barheadboy.com. I wrote a blog this week called "Are We All in a Truman Show?" Because it seems that we're getting fed a false narrative, and they tell us lies all the time, and everything's just a load of nonsense. I mean, when you talk to unionists and they say, "Oh, you can't get independence because you're a part of the 6th largest economy in the world," really? And yet we've got the highest energy prices. 25% of our kids are living in poverty. When does this being in the 6th largest economy in the world actually do anything for the people? Answer is, it never does. It only does for the 1%. That's what it's all about. Clock's beating us. And I did want to do drug issues this week, and I did try to get Anne-Marie Ward on here, but unfortunately she had a prior engagement, which was a great pity because it's a disgrace. But I was going to follow it by this other item, which is Murdo Fraser, because I was going to ask if he's been on drugs. Because look at this. He figures he can, because independence is over as far as Murdo's concerned, because the SNP is all there is about independence. It's not a prospect, so that he can get them to vote Tory if they elect him as leader. Is he on drugs? He doesn't get it, and I don't think many unionists actually understand our movement, or they wouldn't make such ridiculous claims. What do you think, Lloyd? Will SNP people, independentistas, vote for a Tory party led by Murdo?
Murdo's a complete comedy turn on his own. I mean, there are many people who would like to see the back of Murdo Fraser from the Parliament. Me myself, I think he should have a special place. He should be. We have the Scottish Macker. Let's make Murdo the Parliament jester, because he fits the bill absolutely perfectly. I'm finding the whole Tory leadership nonsense a bit of a joke here. Well, not a bit of a joke. It's an absolute pantomime. They're all having a go at each other. They're all biting at each other's backs. They're all stabbing each other in the front, the side, and wherever else. It's astonishing for a party which hit its ceiling. They know it, we know it. In terms of Scotland, the Tory party is about 23 to 25%, and that's it. It's never going to get bigger. In fact, over the coming years, it's probably going to get smaller because, interesting opinion poll that suggested that the Reform Party might get possibly 8% in the Scottish election. But that aside, let's get back to Murdo. What a guy. I mean, he was a reasonably successful solicitor, but he's managed to keep a job in the. I mean, it's a fight between Murdo and Christine Graham for who gets in the Guinness Book of Records for the longest living charlatan in the Scottish Parliament.
You're a naughty man. Mr. Quinn, not you, man. Eva, Murdo. I mean, one of the things I find, for instance, every time you talk to a unionist, everything's about, the money, salary, wages, you'd have to cut this. They make everything monetary. The reason they can never defeat this movement of ours, the reason that we will be independent, they, our enemy, and they are our enemy, they don't understand why we want independence. They think it's about money and mullah, but it's not.
They know the price of everything and the value of nothing.
Exactly.
That is exactly it. I would like us to be finishing on a positive, a high note, because I think that actually Murdo Fraser is right. The Tories will attract votes from SNP voters because some SNP supporters are naturally conservative. We've said this often. And if they think that Scotland's not going to be independent, then the next best thing for them is to vote Tory. But what's heartening to see is that although the SNP are in some places actually hemorrhaging support, as we saw in July, this week's by-election saw John Hannah of the Independence for Scotland party was an 8.5% share of the vote over there in West Lothian. And that was great to see, but it comes for a number of different reasons. One is the integrity of the man as an individual. Another in relation to support for that party because they talk non-stop about independence, which is a lesson for the SNP. And thirdly, at the very least, their support for the rights of women and girls in single-sex spaces. So there is a lot to be optimistic about, and I hope that that result of that by-election is a good start, and it's a reminder to everybody in Scotland who wants independence that we shouldn't be fighting with each other or against each other, but we should be organising ourselves as a collective. That includes Peter Bell and his New Scotland Party, the ISP, ALBA, folk like Sally and me who are independent for independence, and everybody should be coming together under one banner for the good of our country. Look how well the Unionists did it in 2014. And be afraid of what the Unionists can achieve in 2026 if a Unionist coalition takes control in Holyrood. If they do that, the independence dream is not dead, but it's going to be on life support for a lot longer than our country needs it to be.
We do need to come together, but I worry. I saw John Swinney, the leader of the independence movement, de facto leader, talking up British foreign policy in Edinburgh yesterday. The exact same wording of the Foreign Secretary David Lammy and the Prime Minister Starmer. We will support Ukraine till the end. British foreign policy is not your job, John. We told you that last week. And while you've tried to roll things back on Israel and Gaza this week by pretending you're hardcore pro-Palestinian, as long as you're supporting and spouting British foreign policy, we're going nowhere. Get yourself together, man. Phil, Murdo and the Tories taking independence votes. What do you think?
I think they will take, because if the current leadership in the SNP continues to be in charge, and let's face it, who's going to oust them? The people, they're getting rid of everybody that stands up to them. So it's down to the punter, and Angus Robertson took that away as part of it. Unification is the answer for us. We need to work at it, and we need to get rid of those that resist it within the supposed independence parties, and that's the current SNP leadership. They have to go, and everybody that backs them. Well, Murdo, we've spoken enough about Murdo. I think we've given him enough airtime. He's not a pretty picture. But on the critical elements that were mentioned here, and we touched on poverty, that's a grim picture. Drug deaths up. Key in this, and this is a light touch on it, is the 25% of children in poverty that Eva mentioned earlier. I know that it's a big champion, as is Sally, on this, on drug deaths, and I've been sharing about this for a long time as well. But Tuesday statistics, and this showed the average age of drug misuse deaths have increased from 32 to 45 since 2000. Opiates and opioids, including heroin, morphine, methadone, were implicated, right? 8 and 8 out of 10 deaths. Almost 90% of drug misuse is classified as accidental, 7% self-poisoning. And what do we get? What is our supposed representative's response? Neil Gray, not a leader. He was less speechless. He's another sheep. He was less speechless because he's got nothing to say. He's not dealing with this. He's another sheep doing what he's told. He came out with some like, I have faith in the future. Oh, and he's clueless here. And the answer is that he is a puppet and a waste of space. We're failing because people like Neil are focused on his future, are focused on his looking after themselves and fighting the woke agenda instead of fighting for what we want, an independent Scotland. I mean, it's the worst in Europe amid a 12% surge. Figures, as it's 1,172 died from drug misuse in 23. It's a disgrace. And that's the real impact of having clowns like this in charge and not being unified and allowing people like Murdo Fraser a political career.
Sorry about the dog in the background, which I'd love to kill. I really would. My wife won't let me. I keep hoping when I'm out in my car, I'll see it, and all you dog lovers say, "Oh, that's terrible." You don't have to listen to that for hours and end every day. Sally, is your MSP actually in Perth? Murdo, what did you make of his outburst this week?
I didn't really see it, to be honest. I'm not a follower of Murdo, but I don't know if he'll make leader of the Conservatives in Scotland, but he will take votes, and he's adopted the standing up for women, standing against the wokiness. If there's absolutely no chance of Indy being on the table in an election, any election, then I know staunch independent supporters that will no longer give their vote to the SNP and will vote for someone who is strong on standing up for women's spaces, children's rights, anti-puberty blockers. And Murdo has adopted that policy, as have the Tories, and they were always going to do that. And they'll do it partly to give the SNP a bloody nose. John Swinney will stand on the ticket, the constituency and the list seat, because he always does. So he'll probably still be bulletproof and get in this area. So and the other thing is Perth now has 2 hotels full of refugees that she didn't have prior to Brexit. And like it or not, when businesses are shutting left, right and centre and the towns run down, and people will look at that and say, who's going to listen to me when I have concerns about unrestricted immigration? And that has always been the tool, cynically, that has always been the tool that the Tory party has used. Now, we probably know that, they use that as an election campaign, and behind the scenes they bomb the hell out of the countries and create the refugees in the first place. But we are where we are, and people are not. There's a lot of people who are not frothy at the mouth, Tommy Robertson racists. They are just genuine taxpayers, genuinely good people who say it takes a taxpayer to treat refugees properly. And if the taxpayers' base has been crushed to hell with austerity, where's the money coming from, and how can we keep doing this? And where's our say on the number coming in? And that's actually responsible citizenship. It's not frothy at the mouth racism. And unless we at least allow space for that discussion. And I do appreciate how dangerous it is, because it goes off into tangents and it goes into very easily goes into the frothy at the mouth racism. But unless there is some space for that to discuss, then the Conservative Party will own it, all of it, the good, the bad, the indifferent, and the middle bit, and the reasonable corner as well. And you'll be left with well-meaning, but also Looney Tunes, men can become women if they say so, other parties, shall we say. And people vote, they don't vote rationally, they vote emotionally. And so when they see the demographics of their area changing pretty much within the last year, dramatically changing, that concerns them.
Quite right too.
So,
We'll come to the end, folks. I hope with me being techie, it hasn't ruined it for you too much. I don't know really what's happening. If you've actually got this far, it means it went out, which is a result as far as I'm concerned. Come back, John. Come back, Hazel. All is forgiven. But two things I would just say. Anne-Marie Ward, who couldn't, as I say, make it this week, I'm hoping to get a one-on-one with her, and we'll really get into talking about drugs and the solutions, because as maybe a lot of you will noticed, Anne-Marie's taking a step back because she's so frustrated. It goes back to a lot of times what Eve was talking about, not just in drugs, but in all things. Our government and our elected officials seem to listen to the civil service. They don't want to listen to experts and take advice from people who are actually on the ground. So I'll discuss that with Anne-Marie when we get a chance, and I'll do it very, very soon. And on the final bit was, Eva brought it up, was I wanted to leave it right at the end to say about John Hannah, who's been a guest on here and will be again, no doubt. Getting 8.5% is a fantastic result. Okay, low turnout. I hear all you people, all the things. And, you know, a lot of it been a personal because it's his area, not the point. Alba have been going with all they've got in comparison to ISP, and I've not got to be on 2%. It's a fantastic result, and it should give us all hope. There is a vote there, folks, that we need to work on, but we need to work hard. And in the coming weeks and months, we here will lay out some things that we think can be done to do that. And last plug, Hope Over Fear, Glasgow Freedom Square on the 14th of September. We will be there. We will have a stall there, and so will another stall be there beside us. More to be revealed. But until we see you and yours, please, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.